Welcome to my book review for Amazon, Amazon's website where my book is listed for purchase on Kindle, paperback, and hardback. They have a section at the bottom of the listing where I can upload a video about the book. So I have taken a collection of illustrations, maps that I created for the 3 acts of the book. Act 1, 2, 3. I also have a slide for the prologue, which kicks the book off in big time fashion with a Pearl Harbor style attack on the city of Jacksonville and the military bases in and around Jacksonville, which are 7 fairly large bases here where I live. And finally, at the end, Act 3, I added an extra slide at the very end, and it's for the final battle. And I will offer up some spoiler alerts if you just want to listen to the first first 3 slides where I talk about the prologue and Act 1. That won't give away too much. Nothing that you can't learn just by reading the back of the the back cover of the book, or any kind of synopsis or review that you may read online about the story itself. So let's get going. And by the way, shout out to my good friend Jason Myers for the cover art. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Here we go with the prologue. On the far left there, I have 2 shots from 2 different vantage points atop the Wells Fargo building downtown Jacksonville. One looking across the St. Johns River into the San Marco neighborhood of Jacksonville from downtown. And then you see the St. Johns River kind of winds around San Marco. And if you look really close in the far right side of the picture, you see some green sticking out into the water. That is actually the Naval Air Station Jacksonville, or NASJAX as we call it. You can also see NASJAX pinned to the map on the far right. NASJAX base, U.S. Naval Air Reserve. Florida National Guard, Florida Army National Guard, that is Camp Blanding, which is a joint training center now. There's actually some interesting Army units stationed out there. I won't say too much. And of course, we have a nuclear submarine base just across the border in Georgia on the coast there by Brunswick. Moody Air Force Base across the border in Georgia. We have a Marine Corps training facility on an island here in Jacksonville. Mayport Naval Base is in the northern part of Jacksonville. Just tons of military installations in this area. The picture at the bottom left, I'm showing you the sports and entertainment district of downtown, also taken from atop the Wells Fargo building downtown. In the very top part there, where you see the St. Johns River winding around the backside there of downtown, you can make out the TIAA Bank Stadium where the Jacksonville Jaguars play. And then just in front of that would be the baseball stadium, where our AAA Jacksonville minor league baseball team plays. And then you see a building with a large, like, curved white roof. It's the one closest to us. That is the VyStar Veterans Memorial Arena. That's where our AA ice hockey team plays, Jacksonville Icemen. So you've got right there all together arenas for sports. They also have arena football and ABA basketball played in the arena, and then of course the baseball stadium, and then the football stadium. Those landmarks will factor into the opening attack that you'll read about in the prologue. Now, the newspaper article in the middle that I clipped, this is what gave me the idea for the Pearl Harbor style sneak attack in Jacksonville. Jacksonville has a huge port here, Jacksport, lots of cargo coming in and out of Jacksonville. I believe it's in the top 3 or 4 in the nation, or that could be just the East Coast. I'm not really sure about that now that I said it. But this article came out of a British newspaper, and it was pretty telling. China, we know, has the ability to hide cruise missiles inside of containers. And then, of course, you can put containers onto truck beds. You can put it on railroad cars, flat cars. You can put it, of course, on container ships. We have all 3 here in Jacksonville. So yeah, that's kind of a scary thing to think about. We don't inspect all containers. It's just no way to do that. Hopefully, we have some countermeasures in place that would obviously, seek out stuff like propellant, some kind of X-ray scans, stuff of that nature. I would seriously hope we have something like that. But that's not to say that a flagship from another country could not be carrying this stuff, whether they know about it or maybe they don't know about it. China's a pretty sophisticated country, to say the least. They could do something like that. Now we'll move into Act 1. I introduce you to the new Republic of the United Socialist States. So in my story, things devolve as opposed to evolve, thanks to variant upon variant upon variant of COVID-19, the coronavirus that shut down everything in 2020. We've had, a few variants. I don't think we've hit a dozen yet. I could be wrong. But in my story, the COVID virus never goes away. It continues to mutate, and it continues to mutate in very different ways. Some not that bad, just like we've experienced in real life. Others, like Omicron, were pretty bad. Or in my story, we have mutations that are far, far worse than anything we've seen so far in real life. Think if coronavirus joined with Ebola, if it joined with the common cold, that kind of stuff. Very pervasive, and it just does not go away. This basically causes a cascading effect of all kinds of things, not good for the world. And but if you're part of the Chinese hegemonic power, dreams of world domination, then that's a very good thing for you, perhaps, as you'll see in the story. So the United States, following the sneak attack on Jacksonville, basically what happens is factions within the country don't necessarily join with China, but it is a proxy war, and they use this as an opportunity to change our government. And what happens is, naturally, Americans being Americans, we don't like being told what to do, and so we kick off our second civil war. And it's pretty interesting in that the map on the bottom right there, I used a congressional map by districts, and just to show how intermixed this civil war, ongoing guerrilla war, just how different this is from our first civil war back in the 1860s. And this is going to be different in far many ways. I mean, just technology, basic war fighting, surveillance state, the increase of our connectedness, not just to each other, but even our reliance on technology. Much of the global supply chain will be replaced by what I've referred to as tech transsapient cyberkinetics. In other words, microchips, ingestible nanotech that controls everything from nutrition to the inoculations, vaccines, just your daily medication. You have a headache, you don't reach for a bottle of aspirin. Your internal microchip will just download and administer whatever you need to get rid of your headache. That kind of thing. Stuff that you would think would be great, a great, technological advance, but in a time of civil unrest can be used against us as a population. The flag on the bottom left is the flag of the People's Empire of China. So they are no longer the China that we know today. They have become an empire. And in the inset map in the top middle, you see there that China's borders have expanded quite a bit. They include the Korean Peninsula. They include Taiwan. They include all of Southeast Asia. They are trying to branch out through the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, and they do. After 2 wars, 2 invasions of Afghanistan, they finally take Afghanistan, and they take Afghanistan for the rare earth metals in Afghanistan. So China's territorial boundaries, now including Afghanistan, they own over 99% of the rare earth metals on planet Earth. This puts them in a extremely powerful position. over all other countries and any other, power that would possibly stand up against them. The U.S. can't really effectively do it while we're fighting each other. So that's how that looks in the future. All right, next slide. This is also staying in Act 1. I have some flags here. I just was goofing off and decided to make some flags to try to tell the story. Now, the United States, I've got two maps here. One including basically North America, Central America, a little bit of the northern parts of South America, the Caribbean countries. Won't get too much into this. It's not necessarily a spoiler, but the United States and Canada, especially Canada, has been balkanized. That's a term I use a good bit, and it just refers back to the old country of Yugoslavia. Post-World War II, Yugoslavia had one ruler, communist ruler. The fall of the Soviet Union basically threw that country into a tailspin, because then you had all of your sectarian entities within the country splitting apart, breaking apart, and then they ended up in open warfare against each other. Yugoslavian War, the Kosovo War, just a lot of stuff going on over in the Balkans, where groups of people, it became very tribal, basically stopped blaming one another and stopped pointing the finger at one another, and decided to instead use that finger to pull the trigger. And they had a protracted civil war. Lots of terrible things, ethnic cleansing, genocide, you name it, war criminals everywhere. So that's basically what I'm predicting will happen to the quote unquote, the West going forward. I have the Democratic Republic of Florida. This the dark blue territories you see in that first map in the middle there. Basically what happens is Cuba finally becomes a democratic republic after a civil war of their own, and this opens the door for a chance for this enigmatic populist Florida governor to say, okay, we're going to form our own country, and we're going to basically own the Caribbean and what we can of the southeast of the former United States of America. Now, the other blue shaded territories there are the free states of the United States, or independent states of free America. However, both kind of fit here. Free states, meaning they're not part of the NRUS, the United Socialist States, which are backed, as you might guess, by China. And so that I have that there. The theocratic monarchy of Russia. Russia plays a very interesting role in my story. After fighting 3 wars with Ukraine, they have a velvet revolution. No shots are fired, but the people are fed up, and they finally kick out the oligarchs that run the country, much like today. This happens quite a bit in the future, and they end up restoring a theocratic monarchy in Russia. And they try to play the peace broker pretty much everywhere on Earth. Very different than what we would think about Russia right now, with what I'm calling the second war in Ukraine, after the first, of course, being the illegal invasion and occupation to this day of Crimea, which is part of Ukraine still. And just kind of back up a little bit to the prologue. The sneak attack I put out in the year 2061. And then the rest of the story is even further into the future than that. So I purposely wanted to get about anywhere from 60, 80, 100 years away from 2020, which was my impetus for writing the book, for putting the story together. I didn't want to write about Vladimir Putin in my story. I didn't want to write about Trump versus Biden or all the social unrest that was going on in 2020. I just wanted to stay clear and free of that. I didn't want this to necessarily be taking sides of the 2020 political divide. I wanted this to be a clarion call to say, look, this is where this could go if things and events of 2020 were to get worse. And there's no guarantee that it can't get worse. We have no idea what 2024 is going to look like, 2028, 2032. Just keep, pushing it your forecast out, right? We're a pretty divided country, and I think a lot of countries in the West are kind of embroiled in this. I call it social engineering. I call it what I think it is, and if we don't stand together, history tells us we're going to splinter apart. We're going to become balkanized. Canada is probably at a greater threat than the United States, but who knows? I mean, if our politics get so bad that we no longer can talk together, work together, live in peace together, then we could have all-out civil war. Who knows? So that's the end of the illustrations for Act 1. So fair warning here, if you don't like spoilers, then you probably want to cut the video off here. Act 2, you will get more in-depth into the story. So again, don't like spoilers, then you can turn off. Look at the map of North America there in the middle inset. I want to point out something I thought was kind of interesting, this little storyline, is you see Mexico is also partitioned or balkanized. And if you look over toward the Baja Peninsula, the western states of Chihuahua, Sonora, what you see there is that's a whole different color. And in my story, that is basically the Sinaloan drug cartel has formed their own country inside of Mexico. So another interesting little storyline that you see is just another faction that the free states of America have to fight against. And honestly, the NRUS, the puppet government of China, they also have to fight these guys. They become incredibly powerful due to their drug money, and they have a well-equipped, well-organized standing army, and they form their own country. So, moving on, and the Nationalist Republic of Florida, that is where things go bad with our enigmatic governor. He goes from wanting his own country to emulate the bygone United States of America to now becoming militaristic, and he himself becoming a demagogue, and turns the Democratic Republic into a nationalist republic, and they're on a war footing with pretty much everyone, and he sort of becomes a dictator. The old adage of power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, this is a telltale story of that. And in the map on the far right, you see where the borders of this National Republic of Florida have expanded quite a bit. They're taking full advantage of the Civil War, much like the drug cartel did in Mexico. So now on to Act 2. This is a map of the expanse of the Nationalist Republic of Florida. You'll also see here part of the Chinese plan to further balkanize the United States of America, in that the Republic of Texas is born, its own country. Also, Hawaii is no longer a state within the former United States. It is also its own country. We also had, but I'm not going to give away the spoiler here, the state of Utah was offered its own sovereignty to become its own state. The Latter-day Saints religion, as Utah is very much so associated with. You think about Salt Lake City, Provo, BYU out there. At one time in our history, they sought to have their own sort of nation state in the middle of America. I believe it was the hope there was that it actually was a huge territory. It went into California, Nevada, Arizona, all the surrounding states. So China's trying to use that history to further sow discord and division and segregate the former United States of America. They also offer sovereignty to Guam, and then they take it over. So that's the first map to show you for Act 2, and some here in Act 2 as well. Europe, Africa, South America, they're not, they are not left out on the bend towards socialism as a global phenomena. And of course, China's beating the drum supporting all these countries. In Act 2, you start to see some of the European nations turn away from the Chinese influence. They go back to wanting democratic states. You see more blue than red in Act 2 as some of these countries decide to side with the free states of the United States and try to bring back democratic rule as a stalwart across the globe. The bottom left map there, you see the Middle East. The two predominant powers in the future will be Iran and Turkey. Both of these countries wish to return to their past historical glory of the Persian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And so that's a little storyline that goes all the way through the book. And Israel, of course, is a big part of this. So is Saudi Arabia for obvious cultural, religious reasons. And then, of course, the big map, the globe map. This is a hot map. Hotspot map of the latest COVID variant that breaks out. I forget what year this was, 2060 maybe, 2061, something like that. And basically we have a new variant called the Omega variant, and it is killing millions of people around the globe. Far, far, far worse than COVID-19 has been so far. And it's kind of interesting because if you look at maps of Chinese influenced countries, you'll see that their mortality rate's not that bad, but the folks who are fighting against China, they're really bad. And that probably just gives you a little insight into what I think as a person about the origins and proliferation of this virus. So I take full advantage of that as a storyline in my book. Moving on to Act 3, definitely some spoilers here. So, we got two maps of the United States and Canada, or the former United States and the former Canada. And we get into all-out nuclear holocaust in Act 3. Nuclear weapons were used previously at the end of Act 1 and into the beginning of Act 2, so Chapter 7 and 8. Each act has 7 chapters, a total of 21 chapters. And basically, the nuclear onslaught out west by China sets off the Yellowstone supervolcano. So that's why the map on the right, it makes it look as though half of North America is just a dead zone. And it basically is. Everything is radiated. China has bioengineered their soldiers and they're using robotics. Think the Terminator. The vast majority of their ground army is robots. The vast majority of their Air Force is robots. And they depend heavily on missiles. So that's why you see the yellow shading there on the West Coast, because China is still able to occupy this radiated zone with the use of their robots. And they figured out how to bioengineer their soldiers to be super soldiers. Think 7 foot tall, built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And they have been inoculated against chemical weapons, biological weapons, and even radiation. So yeah, it's a pretty dystopic outlook for the future of warfare and the future of humanity as a whole. And then I had the middle map there of Europe, and I labeled this the death of socialism. By the way, the map on the far right showing the nuclear fallout zones, that is noted as the summer without sunshine in the story. You can imagine Yellowstone supervolcano goes off, along with all the fallout from the nuclear warheads going off. There's just so much particulate that is blasted up into our atmosphere, carried by the jet stream. It would not be a good day for anyone. Even the states that still have color on the East Coast, they're going to be heavily impacted by the drastic climatic change that would come from an event that would be, unthinkable, of an all-out nuclear warfare combined with the supervolcano completely erupting out in Yellowstone. So I got one more here for Act 3. This shows you the borders of China. Japan was protected by the United Socialist Nations, which replaced the United Nations. But you can see China doesn't really care about your treaty, just like they didn't care about the treaty that protected the Philippines. They took the Philippines. They took all of Indonesia. They took basically all of the Pacific. And Australia is also in their crosshair. In their firing line. They want all of it. Africa, you can see the black across the top is the black flag of ISIS. Yep, that's right, folks. They're back. I call them AQIM, which is an offshoot of ISIS. They were very heavily involved in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. The French actually fought several battles against the AQIM. They come back from the dead, and Turkey sees them as basically a useful idiot until they turn on them in the final battle. So, and you can see where China on the left there, they've just basically, now they start taking over India. India's hit with all kinds of technological advances by China, and it's just kind of a gigantic tidal wave that they just can't stop. They're kind of on their own there. That map on the left, you see the Turco-Persian Pact. Iran and Turkey agree that we cannot fight each other, because if we do so, we'll end up just like India and Japan, all alone, and China will take us over. So they form a pact, and then they strike political agreements with China to basically not target one another. And this basically allows China to have free reign over invading India, as well as Japan and the Philippines. And then I've got one final slide here. This is what I call the final battle maps, Armageddon maps. You basically see where Hawaii has come back to the United States. Two areas of Canada that are still have people in them because of the nuclear fallout has pretty much wiped out most of Canada. With the jet stream going from its dip south back up north, it carried radiation over the entire country. You see Ohio and West Virginia are blotted out. They were heavily attacked with nuclear weapons. Nothing left there. And you have the states there on the East Coast that are still considered the United States of America. In Act 3, you see a change in politics. The VP of the new Republic of the United Socialist States, she has a change of heart, and she actually ends up leading the collective states of both the NRUS and the Free States of America and the Free States of Canada. She basically gets them to band together and fight against the Chinese invaders. It's a turn back to the old Republic of the United States of America. And then she, spoiler alert, ends up becoming the president of the United States. So it's a redemption story. You know, while we have the enigmatic politician down here in my state who goes to the dark side, if you will, I have VP Jackson. She can probably be made out sort of like a villain in the beginning in Act 1, but she is a story of redemption, and she helps bring America back from the brink of complete annihilation. And it's a pretty interesting story to kind of watch that character change, and not only change, but she rises up to the highest position in the land and is rallying the free world as they gather their forces together for the final battle. And on the right side there, you see the outline of the new United Islamic Caliphate of New Persia, which is Iran, and the Turkish Empire, which is Turkey. And you see there that Israel is back. They are no longer occupied. And that's probably all you need to know there concerning Armageddon. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to give that away. But I did want to share these maps and illustrations with you guys to give you a little background information about the story. I hope you enjoy my book. If you purchase and read my book, please leave a review. 4-star and 5-star reviews help sell books. So I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a review on Amazon.com, on BarnesandNoble.com if that's where you purchased your book. Goodreads, I have a page on Goodreads.com, the Goodreads app you can put on your phone, and leave me a review there. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.